Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim, and our guest today is Chelsea Cohen. So Chelsea, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do.
Yeah, so I am in the e-commerce space. I started out selling on Amazon in 2014. I was out in LA at the time, moved to Austin, Texas in 2016. Started out e-commerce selling on Amazon. I did a little course. And then in 2018, I was having problems with inventory management, running out of stock and overstocking, things like that, which really put a damper on my revenue and my profit. So ended up meeting someone who became my business partner. We started a software company, no experience whatsoever, just had a need and a pain point. And then, that turned into the software being acquired in 2022. And now I work for the company that acquired us. And that company was just recently acquired as well. So it's been an interesting journey this past about almost 11 years now.
So essentially, the software helps with inventory management. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Helps with inventory management for Amazon sellers, e-commerce sellers, and make sure that you don't run out of stock. Make sure that you're not overstocking because Amazon charges a lot of fees. And so we're now getting to the point of adding forecasting for profitability. So not just forecasting for sales and inventory, but also for being more profitable within your business.
That's awesome. And I'm curious, right? Because you started this business back in 2018. So that was 2 years before COVID. And obviously during COVID, inventory management was it was very crazy, very difficult to manage. So how did you kind of work through that with the software? Because it was a very weird time, a very unusual time when it came to e-commerce.
Yeah, exactly. So we came in within the perfect time, actually. While everyone was, kind of shutting down, we were busier than ever. We launched we had a beta launch in 2019, then started hitting our stride beginning of 2020. Everything got more difficult. Supply chains became a problem. Amazon put restrictions on how much inventory you could send. So all of a sudden, people sending direct to Amazon were now having to send from China to a third-party warehouse and then drip into Amazon. So a lot of things changing. There weren't a lot of people because the e-commerce space is interesting in that there are a lot of thought leaders and a lot of people who train and things like that. And there wasn't anyone who knew about inventory. So I ended up going on a lot of webinars and podcasts and speaking at events specifically around the topic of inventory and best practices and things like that.
So in terms of inventory management, right? Because obviously that your software helps with that. But I guess, how do you kind of look at that? Because there's so many different products, some are seasonal, some are not, some are trends. How do you kind of manage those things when it comes to understanding, how to properly have enough stock, whether it's, not too much and not too small of an amount?
Yeah. So inventory management is, I like to say, it's a science and an art. It's kind of, you can use past data and you can kind of, gauge what you expect to sell. But it all starts with being able to process the data correctly. And Amazon will give you the data, but they'll give you raw data. So if you stocked out, if that data is not properly factored out, or if you had, let's say an influencer did a big promotion and you had a huge sales spike, those outliers have to be disregarded to be able to get a good average of what are you actually going to do in the future. Are you going to be repeating any of those patterns? So that's kind of first and foremost. And then you can do a rolling average for steady sales at steady periods of time. And then you have to look at historical seasonal sales if you have a seasonal product. And then, of course, layering on top of that, which is the reason that we built SoStocked, was to be able to add marketing plans, which was a problem within there's very rare, very few choices in software at that point that could actually forecast, but those products didn't include, third-party warehouses, and they didn't include marketing. They would just take that data, do some fancy calculations, not tell you what those calculations were. So we had a lot of transparency where we would lay out how did we get to this number, and then you can put marketing plans in there, which is crucial, is that connection between inventory and marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious in terms of those connections, but also you have things like with certain products, shelf life, right? Because certain products, are going to expire, they're supplements, they're consumable products. So how do you factor that into the equation?
Yeah, so Amazon doesn't give you that data. So there are things that you can do, adding tags. For example, if you have specific products that are going to expire within a period of time, you can put a tag on there and then filter and track that separately to be able to kind of gauge when is that product going to potentially run, into those expiration dates. And it's usually, a lot of products have a shelf life of about 2 years, but when you get into consumables like grocery products, it's a lot shorter than that. So we would probably set up a special dashboard so you could track those things and then know when you have to do those specific sales events to move through that inventory.
For sure. And obviously many products today are using AI when it comes to their data and like their modeling. So does your product currently use AI? And if not, like where could it maybe like bring in some value here in 2025?
Yeah, so AI, it's interesting. We use AI for planning, like when I do product planning and things like that. Our developers leverage AI to be able to, streamline their coding. But as far as calculations, AI isn't there yet. It will get simple math done. It'll get this whole complex calculation, and then at the end of the line, it'll not be able to add the numbers right. So it's interesting. It is getting better, like I said, but that side of things, it's helpful to be able to use that to do our product planning. But it also has a hard time doing complex math. So we forecast for a year in advance, and it can't do those calculations to kind of build on top of the standard mathematics.
For sure. And then in terms of your product specifically, obviously, I'm sure there's lots of different use cases. But like, what are some of the best use cases when it comes to like, do you look at volume, product SKUs, even location where people are selling, where your product really brings in like the most value for people?
I think part of it is the timeline. Like that's our big differentiator from a lot of other products. The timeline is very complex in terms of, there's a lot more calculation going into it, which is why a lot of softwares don't go down that route. There are softwares that will be focused on various different tools that they do well, and then they'll have an and inventory, but it's very basic. It's your next order. And because so many things change all the time with inventory and Amazon changes things, I've always felt it's important to have a dedicated inventory tool because of that. And the timeline has allowed people to do their planning, and has also allowed us to be the only software that does forecasting for storage fees. And there's a fee called aged inventory when your product has been sitting there too long. So we do that calculation because we have the timeline, and we basically take Amazon's policies and put them into that timeline so that people can see, if they're at 9 months, your product basically dives off a cliff in terms of Amazon charges you a lot of fees. So we'll be able to see you've got a product that in 4 months is going to, hit that point. You should do something now because, suddenly it'll be too late where you get a big charge on your account that you weren't expecting.
So you're saying do something now. So essentially that would be kind of slowing down how much inventory that you're bringing in.
Yeah, and also doing sales, things like that. Being able to plan for, if you've got a product that, we can see what the forecast is, right? We'll do the forecast and you'll be able to see, okay, we've got a product, or a set of products that are being charged inventory or are going to be charged inventory fees. So taking action to do lightning deals or do, email campaigns, things like that to move that inventory before it gets into taking money out of your pocket pretty significantly.
For sure. And then in terms of like the use case for your product, right? Because many sellers today are selling on many different channels. So do you kind of see your product potentially helping folks in other channels, whether it's direct to consumer, Walmart, things like that, or is it really only focused on Amazon?
Right. So currently we're focused on Amazon. We have ways of being able to track these different things, but that's definitely on our roadmap is to be able to, there's a lot more multi-channel happening. So that's, we're working right now on profitability. The fees from last year were very, very negatively impactful to people. So profitability is the focus, and then going into multi-channel after that. But we do have some techniques that we can use building into the current framework.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's definitely exciting because, yeah, I mean, just to your point, many people are looking to sell on more channels. So obviously now we're still in Q1 of 2025. So besides potentially adding more channels to the platform, like, what are some of your biggest goals and objectives for this year?
Yeah, really it's becoming a forecasting software. We're thought of as an inventory software, but one of the spaces that has been missing is being able to forecast profit and forecast cash flow. So that's my big goal. Inventory was always a means to an end, which is to improve the decision making. There's a famous quote by Peter Drucker that talks about strategic planning, and that strategic planning is not about the future; it's about the present decisions that create the future. And I think a lot of the industry looks at what's happening today, what's happening a couple of months down the road for special events, and what happened yesterday, but not product planning and cash flow planning for scale. A lot of people want scale, they want growth, but the elements of scale and growth are profit and cash flow, and yet there is not enough strategic planning around those two things.
Awesome. So obviously that you've been doing this for some time. So if you could go back in time to before you got started, what is the one biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew?
When it comes to e-commerce, it really is that profit and cash flow piece of things, and being able to, to forecast and being able to see when a product wasn't working, or listen to, look at the numbers. There were a couple of products that we launched back then that we shouldn't have. The numbers didn't make sense. It looked good to the brand, but the numbers didn't make sense. Sometimes the numbers can make sense if you look at the business differently. So I think it's just that's a big takeaway is, I'm looking at a set of products right now where the pricing is so different between the competitors, and, and you wonder, well, why is this? How are they able to operate? And we do a lot with advising on resizing. A product economics can change significantly by resizing a product right out the gate. So when you're sourcing a product, can you get that into a smaller size so that you can gain 40 cents? Sometimes you switch to a little lower tier and it's 40 cents that you save per unit. So I think that being thoughtful about how you structure your profit, how you structure your cash flow with payment terms, those are the things that starting out, didn't know, but now we know those things, and that's why I'm passionate about it, because it could mean the difference between, a business surviving and not.
For sure. So if somebody wanted to use your product or somebody wanted to reach out, what's the best way for somebody to get in contact with you?
Yeah. So SoStocked.com/connect. That's where you can find my socials and things like that, and take a look at the product. And then also, if you went to carbon6.io/SoStocked. Carbon 6 is a suite of tools. I do, product reimbursement. Of course, SoStocked is a part of that, doing external traffic and DSP. And so we're one of those tools. And so you can go onto that particular domain, and we offer a free profit audit. So we'll look at your entire catalog and be able to tell you, what are some of your liabilities? Do you have aged inventory coming up the next year? Are there product resizing opportunities so that you can start to work towards more profitability?
So, well, Chelsea, thanks so much for your time today.
Of course. Yep. Thanks for having me.